in Australia and a passionate advocate for strengthening for our profession. Let's give Nicola a warm welcome.
Olga. Thank you very much, Olga, for that warm welcome. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of Project Management Institute of New Zealand, PMINZ. And like Olga, I'd like to acknowledge the generosity of the University of Auckland for letting us use this wonderful, relatively new space. I'd also like to do a shout out to the Auckland PMO Forum, and we have some of the Auckland PMO Forum members here. The Auckland PMO Forum has been keeping the light of PMOs alive for, gosh, over 15 years, and I'm really proud to be a member of that. And of course, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to New Zealand, Eileen Roden.
Thank you.
Eileen tells me she's actually on holiday. So isn't it wonderful that she's given up this time to join us on behalf of the House of PMO. So over to you, Eileen.
Thanks very much. So I couldn't think of anything better to do on my holiday than to meet some PMO people. Why would you not want to do that? My husband's become very understanding over the years. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the PMO Competency Framework, but just a little bit about me, and then you kind of know why I spend my life doing PMO things and why I've got PMO tattooed on my wrist as a permanent reminder as to kind of what my life's work is about. So, you know, if people are ever kind of worried about whether I was late to the party or not really believing in the PMO, then that usually kind of convinces them. And people come and rub it to check that it's real, and it absolutely is. So, I've been in. I get to the point now where I think I'm the oldest person in the room, which makes me feel really old sometimes, but that is just where we've been. I've been around PMOs probably all my working life, but I started working in IT. I was pretty rubbish at IT. And I became an IT project manager, which I was kind of slightly better at, and then ended up in HR. Thought I'll do all of the jobs that people don't like, IT, HR, and ended up doing some forecast resourcing for projects, and then accidentally fell into the PMO and thought I'd died and gone to heaven, and have never ever had any reason that's taken me out of a PMO. So I've either been running a PMO or been working on the other side now for over 20 odd years, doing consultancy, training, helping organizations establish PMOs, helping them run projects, programs better, and particularly working with individuals to develop their skills and capability to do a better job and do that lovely phrase of adding value for their organizations. So currently I do two key things. I'm a director of the House of PMO, which is a professional body we set up for people who work in a PMO. And I'll just tell you a little bit about that shortly. We also have a PMO training company called PMO Learning, which is what brought me over to Australia for 2 weeks, which is why I'm over here. Because I didn't want to do project management training, I wanted to train PMO people. So quite niche, specifically for PMO people. So as I said, I've done 17 years actually kind of doing what I always say, doing a real job. The last 20 years has been really helping other people to do their job. Those of you who might know Axelos P3O product, anybody know the P3O? So I was the lead author of that. Also the lead author of the competency framework that I'm going to talk about today, and a couple of other bits and pieces in there as well. And I also created the examinations based off the competency framework. So I do spend literally all of my working days. 2 of my children I've managed to persuade to work in PMO. So 2 out of 4, 50-50. We're not doing too badly, I don't think. So let's just tell you what we're going to do. I want to tell you a bit about the House of PMO, because I think that's quite important from the perspective in terms of where the PMO Competency Framework came from. I'll tell you a bit about kind of how and how we got to the PMO Competency Framework. And I'll talk about the structure of it, how we're going to use it, and then what's next for the Competency PMO and House of PMO. So this is my friend Lindsay. I think I'm looking a bit younger then, and so is she. Lindsay and I met back in 1999, last century, for those of you, yes, and we met at a PMO event, and typically Lindsay and I would be the last man standing at the end of the night, talking about PMOs with anybody who would listen, and we kept bumping into each other at PMO events, and then started running PMO events, and then never stopped running PMO events. So we've been doing this for about 25 years. And when we started off, I think there was one group in the UK, and it started in 1999, which was all about kind of PMOs. But other than that, what we would do is we'd then go to project management events and then just trying to take something off a project management event that we could use within the PMO. But there was nothing specifically for PMO people. So Lindsay and I continued to do this while both of us then had proper jobs in other organisations. And then eventually we decided that there was enough work for us to do that we can actually kind of set that up as a business. So we set up the House of PMO. And it was really, it's about providing support for people who work in and around PMO. So I don't know about you, but I would go places and people say, what do you do? And you'd look at them and think, how much do they know? Am I going to chance saying PMO, or do I just say I work in project management? Yes. And we really want to get to a place where we can say we work in the PMO and people go, oh, I know what that is. Yes. So my husband calls PMO project management operations is what he calls it. But what we wanted is we often call it a self-help group. So for people who work in PMOs who really want some support in their development, who just get what they do on a day-to-day basis, know their challenges, recognize that their role is very different to a project manager, a program manager, though there is a huge overlap between the two. And we've had lots of conversations about this. What does the P stand for in PMO? And PMI decided, well, actually, we may as well just call ourselves XMO. Quite happy the lights go down, then the presentation is easier to see. An XMO, because the P tends to confuse people. And so what we've done is we said, actually, PMO is no longer an acronym. Let's stop worrying about what the P stands for or the M and the O stands for. Let's just, PMO is a noun that describes an individual, a group, a team, a department or a division who are there to support project and program delivery in an organization. And that could cover anybody from, kind of a PMO administrator right up to a PMO director. If we're there to support the organization and delivering projects better, then we're happy with that. So essentially we'll support anybody who kind of sits within that category. And much as, we don't do things specifically for project managers and program managers or sponsors. We do get quite a few who kind of come along because they interact with the PMO and they're trying to get a better understanding of how they can actually kind of work with the PMO in their organizations. And Lindsay and I do go and speak at project management conferences to kind of just try and educate people in terms of what PMOs are actually there to do and how we can help. So what the House of PMO does is we run a number of events. We have webinars at least once a week, often twice a week. We have a book club. We have a monthly magazine webinar. And just this year, literally, it's I don't know what it's been like over here in New Zealand, but in the UK, the world is just starting to get over COVID. So they've just started coming back out. So this year, 2025, we've had a lot of kind of face-to-face events as well. So, and what we've grown, literally when we started off, Lindsay and I would say, we're going to be in a pub on Thursday night. If you want to come and talk PMO, we'll be in the pub. And we were getting 40 to 50 people in the pub every month. So we decided actually if we could probably organise some kind of more events. And this year we had our 10th conference where we had over 500 people at our conference in London. So we've definitely kind of grown a community out there of people who really want the support. Just leave them, they're fine. Who really just want the support of other people who work in and around PMOs. So that's the community that we serve. This is not, it's not me and Lindsay. This is everything we know about PMOs and we're going to share it with the world. We genuinely kind of just want to make sure that if there's things going on in PMO, we bring that to our community. We give people a voice to talk about their success stories. We give people an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that they have. We bring together people into a space to look at how some organizations have really attacked some of the challenges, and so we can share that with some of our other members. So really we're just kind of about bringing people together and having those conversations, though both of us have kind of worked in and around PMOs all of our working life. So when we started this, we were kind of, one of the biggest challenges we've got is that people still don't know what a PMO does. And there is, sadly, there's still a huge contingent of people who think we do admin. You mention the word support and they go, oh yeah, you're the ones who book the tickets and you sort out the conference rooms and don't you sort out all of the catering and book our training events? And you go, well, yes, we do, but we also do some other stuff as well and some strategically important things for the organisation. And there's still a huge amount of work to educate even sometimes project and program managers about what the PMO does. So we've been grappling this for a long time. And because there's such a wide diversity of what PMOs do and the work that's involved in that, it becomes very difficult for anybody to produce anything because you're essentially covering anybody who does book travel right up to somebody who's facilitating project prioritization on a £6 billion portfolio for the next 12 months and everybody in between. So it's been quite difficult to get that focus. And so when we looked as well at the training that was out there and the education that was out there, there was only things for people with project management. And P3O did come out in 2009. Just leave the lights, we're fine. It's fine, I don't mind. I can be in darkness. In 2009. But before that, there really wasn't anything out there. And when we were trying to kind of work out, kind of how do we develop our skills and capability? How do we demonstrate that we're competent to be able to do a PMO job? There was really no measure to be able to kind of go out and demonstrate that. It was difficult to articulate that either on a CV or what we also found, people who are doing recruitment really struggled to put into words what they were looking for from somebody who was working in a PMO. And it's still the case today. Even if you see PMO manager, it could still mean you're kind of booking the coffee in. I know my first PMO manager's job, I got the stationery cupboard. Yes, and all the room bookings for the department. So, even with a PMO manager's job title, you're still not sure what that is. And we were looking for something that would actually kind of take us through our whole career within PMO. So people, again, often see PMO as somewhere where you grow. So when you grow up, you can be a project manager. And actually, there's more and more recognition now that actually PMO is a career in its own right. And project managers choose to come out of project management into the PMO because it has some very different challenges and actually is a great, I don't understand why anybody doesn't want to work in a PMO, but that's me. But it's an interesting place to work and has very senior jobs that can kind of see you in every industry in the organization. And also in every industry across the world, there are PMOs now. So loads of opportunity, but nothing really to help us through that. So in terms of what was out there, I'd done a lot of work with the Association of Project Management. So people might know that that's the equivalent of your Australian Institute of Project Management. I'd worked on the Project Management Competency Framework. I'd gone into organizations and I'd tailored the Project Management Competency Framework for their project managers. And even the APM were saying, well, we can kind of tweak it for kind of people who work in the PMO. But it was really difficult because it was all about people who have accountability for delivery of the projects and the benefits. And therefore, it just didn't sit with the PMO because even though we're working on projects, we're there to support the project manager, we don't have accountability for delivery. And an awful lot of the work that we do is about setting up the ecosystem that allows projects and programs to work in an organization and therefore is just not covered by the work you do on an individual project or program. As I said, 2009, the first version came out, and then 2013, P3O came out. So, and I can never remember what order they're in. Portfolio Program and Project Officers, which was a publication and a qualification by Axelos. And that's still out there, and I wrote it, so I know, but that's all about setting up a PMO. It's not about the individuals who work within the PMO. And for those of you who might know, at the March this year, PMI collaborated with Americo Pinto, who's now gone to work at PMI. And we've now got a project management officer's guide from the PMI. But again, that's about setting up PMOs. And although it has some references to the people who work within it, it's not focused on building up the skills and capabilities of individuals there. So really there was nothing. And so Lindsay and I said, well, we can do this. Yeah, what we didn't mean we could do it. Our general kind of view was that we wanted something that was actually done by a broad range of individuals that actually was kind of for themselves, because we were the people who knew, I don't mean us, I mean our community were the people who know what we do on a day-to-day basis. We know what good looks like, we know what bad looks like. And this was the kind of the biggest kind of pool of individuals that we could call upon to do this piece of work. So we sat down, a number of us, and we got some HR specialist help in to look at the structure of a competence framework, and then got a group of people, of volunteers. Now, if anybody works with a bunch of volunteers, it's like herding cats. Rightly so. People's priorities are home life, paid employment, and then some volunteer stuff if I've got any time left in the week. And so it was a 5-year labour of love to write the competency framework. Ended up myself and my friend Carol, who's the digital PMO in the Houses of Parliament, eventually spending kind of between 8 and 10 every morning for the last 6 months, just kind of putting it all together. But it's been done. Yes, and it's been written by PMO professionals, people who are doing the job. So it's not done by people who sit in a nice white ivory tower and think we know what PMOs do. It's been written by practitioners. So the stuff that's in there, and we've had global representation on that, and it's been reviewed, by a publisher. So it's published by the Stationery Office. So we think it's a good thing. Yes, and the people who've used it said it's really been invaluable, and organisations and large global organisations have taken it and embedded it within their organisations as a way to create development plans for their staff. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. So it's there and it's around, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what's in it and what it looks like. I don't know whether you've ever kind of tried to think about the structure of a competence framework. But when we started looking at this, there was so many different dimensions about where we could start and what we might want to be looking at, and what was the kind of the most important things to have in there. So let's look at kind of where we ended up. So within it, this is the book. It has lots of different bits in it, and it's quite a big publication to get. And I'm just going to take you through a bit at a time some of the things that's in there. So the first thing we started off was, well, what jobs are there in the PMO? Now, if anybody's looked for a PMO job, you'll realise, well, nobody can agree what the name of the PMO is for the first thing. So yes, that could be called a change management office, a value management office, a change office, a PMO, a project office. You know, there's a whole range of names for that to start with. But in terms of the roles that sit within that, you can have lots of generic roles, but there's also a number of specialist roles. So you might have a risk specialist, a benefit specialist, a business case specialist. So you've got some generic roles who will basically kind of do a bit of everything to support projects and programs. And then you've got these very specialist roles that typically develop the standards for the organization. So we thought, well, kind of where do we start with all of that mess to try and find something that can be done kind of consistently? So what we did is we looked about kind of progression and kind of seniority, rather than kind of specific roles. So we came up with 4 generic roles. So the first one is the PMO administrator. So this is typically often a graduate level entry job, or somebody who's come in to the PMO without any project management experience at all. Yes, and so they don't necessarily understand the whole world of projects, but they've got some good transferable skills, and they do what it says on the tin. So they essentially do the administration and secretarial aspects. Now, I don't want to discredit these people, because doing this in a project environment is quite different sometimes from doing it in a business as usual environment. And at our conference just after COVID, we had people there from the NHS doing a talk on how they use their PMO through COVID to make sure that everything went as I was going to say as planned, but nothing went as planned, as good as we could get through COVID. And what was really interesting, they said the biggest service that the PMO did through COVID was the administration of the meetings and the decisions to make sure all of that was kind of spread out and all of the projects were actually continued to be aligned. So these administration services are really quite important. And as we know, if the people who are doing those services and supporting the projects and the program actually understand projects and the key elements of projects and what a stage gate meeting might be and what's important about a risk register, they can actually kind of do that a much better job if they actually understand the context of their role. So that would be it. So that's really kind of the entry level job. The second role we identified was the PMO analyst role. So sometimes called a PMO coordinator, sometimes the PMO coordinator kind of crosses both of those. The PMO analyst was the most difficult one because it is such a big role. It can cover anybody from just kind of being, kind of really getting their head around working in a project environment and moving up and starting to understand some of the kind of the project fundamentals. So things like they start to understand risk management, they start to understand perhaps planning and reporting. So they're definitely kind of supporting the projects now rather than just doing the admin. But it also goes right to the very top of a PMO analyst who, instead of supporting the project manager, is actually coaching the project manager, because they are the people in the organization who know how we do projects around here. We know our processes for doing planning. We know all of the systems and tools that are there. We also know the people who in procurement who you need to speak to make sure that you've got everything on time. We also know all of the secretaries of all of the senior executives to make sure that you can get a meeting with them when you need to get something signed off. And it also includes all of the people who are specialists, so things like we talked about the risk management specialist, the business case specialist, etc. So we did that, and we said the person who does this analyst role essentially has two jobs. Firstly, they are the person who supports project and program managers. So you may find people in the PMO analyst role who are the scheduler. So I was doing some training the last couple of weeks over in Melbourne, and a number of the people who were there on the analyst course were actually kind of schedulers. So their day-to-day job was to pull together the schedule critical paths on behalf of the project managers, resource load it and cost load it. So that was their role, but actually the PMO analyst role could have a whole range of different activities. And very often these PMO analysts are actually doing a project manager's job. They're doing an element of the project manager's job. But they're doing it with a slightly different head on, because we tend to be responsible, not accountable for it, because the book has to sit with the project manager. So that's where we spend an awful lot of our time with the analyst role, and again, developing some of those standards. So in this second bullet point here, we said that the analyst also spends time helping the PMO manager actually kind of roll out some of the new initiatives. So whether that might be a new system, a new template, a new process, a new kind of workshop, whatever, understanding what the current portfolio is, what the prioritization is. It's typically the PMO analyst who might get some small projects to run in the PMO to roll those things out. So as a PMO analyst, potentially you're doing some project management, some change management, as well as supporting some projects and programs in delivery. Okay, so that's where the PMO analyst role sits. Next one, as we kind of go up the ladder, is the PMO manager. Now, I have to say there are a number of people who quite happily sit at PMO analyst and are not interested in going any further than that, because there's such a wide variety of jobs. And I don't know what it's like here in New Zealand, but certainly I talked about schedulers. Some of the skills of the analyst are so scarce, yes, that actually it's profitable for individuals to kind of continue being at the analyst role rather than kind of move up to the manager role. So, but the manager role there is about making sure it's not just about the line management of the people that we've got in the PMO. It's about making sure that the PMO that I run is actually doing the right things for the organization. So this is where things like kind of P3O, the PMI standard says, if you're running a PMO, you need to make sure that what you're doing is right for your part of the organization. And the interesting thing is what might be right in one organization might be completely different in another organization. And even if it's right in one part of your organization, potentially you might run a PMO for a different project or another program, another part of the organization, and you might do something completely different. And so your focus as a PMO manager is, what is it? What's the scope of my PMO? And am I doing the right things that are driving the objectives that have been set for me? So that's where the focus of the PMO manager is. And then finally, we've got this concept of a PMO director. And what was really interesting is when we started doing this and we put the PMO director all out there, people said, no, there's no such thing as a PMO director, Eileen, that role doesn't exist. And I said, they do, because I've spoken to them, yes, and we've been involved in them. And somebody actually who I used to work with, I had an opportunity to come and live over in Australia a couple of times, and I would have gone and done the role with him as a PMO director. So they definitely do exist down here and across the globe. And the idea of the PMO director is essentially they are there working at board level or supporting the board to make sure that we actually kind of understand how we deliver projects in our organisation and how best we can support them from a PMO perspective. So currently working with a large defence contractor back in the UK. And they've got PMOs splattered technical phrase, splattered across the whole organisation. And actually they're disconnected from each other. There's nobody, you know, they all do their own thing. And I'm sure what they all do is right for their parts of the organisation. And in some parts of the organisation, PMO, the people who work in the PMO are hugely skilled, develop some great services, make a real difference to the successful delivery of projects and programmes. In other parts of the organisation, what you've got is people who go, PMO what was that? Don't understand what it means. And so some of those projects and programme managers actually have no support at all from the PMOs, and they do little more than reporting. And the PMO director said, if we can we understand what the organisation wants to deliver from a project programme management perspective to achieve the strategy, then actually what we can do is we can make sure the project processes that are used for delivery are the most appropriate. So whether that's waterfall, agile, wagile, or what's the other one I heard? Agile fall, or whatever they call it, whatever the combination is of methods and processes and systems, if we have a consistent view of how they're used across the organisation, we look at the skills and capability of people we might want or need within the PMO, we can actually start deciding how best to support projects at an organisational level rather than just on a PMO and PMO level, which gives us a much more effective and that lovely phrase, a bigger bang for our buck with the PMO people we have working with us. So that's where we are with the PMO director. So I'm just curious in the audience now, does anybody not recognise their role in one of those four? So I'm not going to ask you which one. Does that cover everything everybody does? Hope nobody feels left out. Yes. So your job title might be different to that. Yes. It might also kind of cover two or more of those roles, and we have this lovely with this lovely phrase which we've adopted now, and people have varying kind of responses to it, called a POO, yes, which is a PMO of one. Yes, and I'm a single individual and I have to do a bit of all of those roles. Yes, I have to book the coffees, but at the same time, I'm working with the director to talk about the portfolio report. The project manager wants me to kind of facilitate a risk identification workshop, and I've got to do a template because we're starting to talk about benefits. So I end up doing a bit of all of it. Yes, and those people exist and we recognize that. But these are essentially the four levels of roles that we saw that hopefully, as we've kind of validated here, cover all of the various activities that we take part in a PMO. We also recognised that there are also the option that some people, typically at the PMO manager and PMO director level, also have project managers reporting into them. Okay, and so that's sometimes the case. Now, we know that sometimes happens. Now, what we see, and we try to be kind of quite clear about this, because some PMO managers don't do themselves any favours, okay, because they suddenly see themselves accountable for the delivery of projects. And we say, absolutely not the case. Yes, what you do is you provide a project manager and you give them to a project sponsor, and it's the project sponsor who's accountable for the delivery. So essentially they go on secondment to the project, and as a PMO manager, I'm not accountable for how that project delivers. Okay, now that's if anybody disagrees with that, I'm very happy to have a conversation about that. But fundamentally, we don't believe PMO managers should be held accountable for the delivery of projects, because any textbook, any project management textbook says project managers report into project sponsors, report into the executive board. Nowhere does it say along the path that the PMO manager can kind of stomp in with both feet, make decisions on the project, change the scope and how things are being done. Okay, so we recognise they may have line management for project managers, but that doesn't make them accountable for the delivery of projects. So that was the first bit, and that took quite a while, just even to kind of get that kind of bottled down into form. And as I already mentioned, what people do, and again, building on some of the work that was done in the P301, and I recognise we've got kind of slightly different views, but essentially we either support a project, a programme, portfolio, or we do centre of excellence activities. Now, there's different things in terms of whether you're a controlling or a directive PMO, but essentially you're going to be doing one of those four things. Yes, so I always kind of think it interesting because people don't, very rarely now, there's a project office that is just one project or a programme office that is just one programme. Typically, we have an office that covers multiple projects and programmes, does a bit of portfolio and does a few templates. And again, so we recognise, as I already mentioned, individuals can be working at all of these four different levels. However, just because I can do benefits management in a programme office doesn't mean I can do benefits management in a centre of excellence. So I was doing some coaching with a lady who'd been in a programme office. She'd been very successful and she was the benefits management specialist. And so as the programme was developing, she was keeping a track of the benefits, doing all of the reporting, making sure that the benefits owners were contacted, the risks around the benefits were all being looked after. And she did a really good job. So she was very buoyed up by this and she went and applied for a job as a benefits specialist in another company. Bit of a pay rise, of course. Gets to the new company and they said, we want you to set up benefits management in our organisation. And she went, well, I can't do that. I can turn the handle when it's all been set up, but actually being able to set up benefits management is a whole new different ballgame. Okay, so she was competent in benefits management at a programme level, in a programme, but not necessarily at centre of excellence. So we said, when we do the competence framework, we have to recognise that there are four different contexts. And just because you're competent in one doesn't necessarily mean you're competent in the other one. So I can know risk management on a project inside down, upside down. Perfect. I go up to a programme level and all of a sudden that extra complexity of looking at risk across projects, being able to kind of escalate them up to programme level actually is a new step in terms of competence level. So therefore we separated the competences out into the four different contexts. Now, as an individual, you might need a bit of all of them, but for those people who just work at a project level or just work at a programme level, we've actually separated out the indicators. And again, one of the things that we tell people is it's really useful now when you go for a job interview, you can start asking questions. When you say you want me to do benefits management, tell me what you want to do about me, what you want me to do around benefits management. Am I going to be supporting processes that are established at a programme level where I've got a programme manager and a change manager to work with? Am I going to be doing benefits management at a portfolio level, which means that I'm going to be aligning it to strategy and understanding how the realisation is happening, and that means I have to understand what's happening in the business as usual to be able to consolidate that? Or am I going to be developing the new standards and implementing them and be seen as the expert across the organisation? So we're starting to kind of pull out some of those kind of key questions. So we sorted the rules and we've sorted the context. And then we started talking about, well, what is it people do in their day-to-day jobs? And one of the things that became very clear very quickly is that we could end up writing something that was even bigger than we've written. Because as a PMO person, you do need to know project management. You do need to know program management. You might even need to know portfolio management. And what we did is we identified 6 other competencies or competence areas where competence frameworks already exist. And we said, we're not going to rewrite them. There's no point in kind of rewriting things that already exist. So what we'll do is we'll say you need to be competent at a particular level, but we're not going to go into any detail. So I identified 6. So if you work in a PMO, potentially you need to know project management, program management, portfolio management, change management, because if you're implementing change into an organization, so a new system, a new process, a new template, you're going to be doing some change management activities. Business analysis, because you're going to be changing the processes, so you're going to need some business analysis skills. And also if you're going to be a team leader or a manager, you're going to need some leadership and management skills as well. So we said, we're not going to teach people, we're not going to put in our competency framework anything where there's a competence framework elsewhere or some references that you can get. What we want to focus on is just those PMO competencies that aren't covered anywhere else. So that gave us a big sigh of relief, because that got rid of a whole load of work kind of straight off. We don't need to do any of that. So let's just kind of boil it down in terms of what is it that we do in a PMO that we need to be able to demonstrate competence, and how can we create some indicators that would allow us to kind of demonstrate and for people to kind of check that we were competent at that job. And what we came up with is 24 competences in 4 different domains. And I'll talk about the domains. You'd be pleased to know I'm not going to cover all 24 competences today. So first one is P3M administration. So we recognize that we do administration and it's there. And typically, you know, I would argue there are still a number of jobs where, regardless how senior you get, there's still going to be some administration tasks. So that's a single competence in its own right. PMO management is a competence in its own right, but again, that's about managing the PMO. So it's not about line management and managing the staff and doing development plans and one-to-ones. It's about making sure our PMO is there, set up to do what it needs to be. And then we've got 2 groups, which is P3M delivery support and P3M enabling. So P3M project portfolio and program management. So within the delivery support, what you'll see there is a list of things that you'll say, well, Eileen, that's just project management. And I'll say, absolutely right, that is project management, because as a PMO person, probably at a PMO analyst perspective, those are the things that we will do on behalf of a project manager. They're also the things that, as a centre of excellence, we determine the processes, the systems, the tools, the templates, and the education and the training support all of those elements. And therefore, we've got competencies about, I can't remember the number, 18 or 19 or so in that P3M delivery support area. The interesting thing is that even as a PMO manager or a PMO director, I'm still doing P3M delivery support because I'm still doing things like reporting insights and analysis. If I'm a PMO director reporting into the board and I'm taking them through what's happened in the portfolio in the last month, that's still reporting insights and analysis. Yeah, so we're still actually helping the support and the delivery of projects and programs. Sorry, excuse me. And then I said, one of the problems with our job is that not everything we do is in relation to the support of individual projects and programs. A lot of what we do is what we call these enabling competencies, where actually we do them for across the organization to create the ecosystem that allows project and program management to run. So things like capacity management, capability development, deciding on the kind of overall delivery methods. They're things hopefully we kind of do once in a perfect world across the whole organization. In a less perfect world for our division or our department, where we've got the scope of our PMO, that basically says this is kind of how all of the projects and all of the programs sit together to be able to kind of work in an ecosystem that allows them to deliver. So those are the 24 competencies that we've come up with. And again, we had less than that, we had more than that. We had a couple of interesting ones as to kind of whether they should go in. Just curious. Innovation. Anybody think innovation should be in there? Yes, so there's and I'm quite happy. We had lots of conversations. The other one, which probably, because this was now, it's been 3 or 4 years since this was written. The other one is data analytics. So we've got reporting, insights and analysis, but the whole kind of data analytics thing has kind of certainly exploded in the last couple of years. So it's always interesting in terms of how the world continues to move on. So those are the 2 that I vaguely remember kind of we came out. A couple of them ended up being linked together. We still have people having a conversation about the difference between information management and knowledge management. But I think whatever group we came up with, the whole world would never have been happy. So that's what we ended up with. But hopefully, and again, I am very happy to have a conversation with anybody who says, Eileen, I can't see what I do on a day-to-day basis in those competencies there. But we're hopefully that what we've got now is a list of competencies where we can see what we do on a day-to-day basis, where we can actually kind of measure ourselves. So for each competence, we have a whole kind of detail about what's in there. We have the definition. This is P3M administration, which is kind of pretty straightforward. And then what we also want to have was a description. So people actually, rather than, you know, the definition is kind of 1 or 2 sentences, which basically is such a catch-all statement, it means nothing to nobody. So we put in a kind of a description in there as well to say, this is what it actually means in practice. This is what we're essentially doing on a day-to-day basis in terms of kind of demonstrating those skills. And we put in there, you know, this is not just about supporting the project and program manager. It is about the wider function than that as well. So we've got a definition, a description. We talk about some key terms. Now, bear in mind that we're not aligned to any particular professional body or theory. So what we've tried to do is to be bilingual, multilingual. And so there are PMI terms, there's APM terms, there's AXLOS terms. We basically said these are the types of words and phrases that you will hear around this particular competence. So we're just trying to broaden people's mind to get away from just the 3 terms that you use in your organization. We also have in there any services. So we work on this principle of a service-based PMO, which I haven't got time to cover off tonight, but I'm happy to do another talk. So basically, so these are the types of things we do in a PMO that would use this particular competence. We also then cover off any potential overlap. Again, there was a couple of things where we said, well, it could be in finance, it could be in admin, it could be in reporting. So we just recognized that these are not completely perfect silos like we would want them to be. That would have been kind of too difficult a job. And again, not everybody would have agreed with our call. So we just recognize that and say, you know, there may be we may call it administration, you may call it finance, but this is where we've covered that off. And then finally, we've got this concept of proficiency levels. Okay, so how good are we at this particular competence? And we go from foundation through intermediate, advanced, and expert. And what we see is that as we go from foundation to expert, you'll see that it goes up in terms of our timeline that we look at, how much autonomy we've got to do that role. One thing that came and hit us kind of as we were kind of going through this, administrator is not always foundation, and the director is not always the expert, okay? Because sometimes the analyst is the expert. Because as an analyst, if I'm the risk management specialist, I'm not a PMO manager because I'm not running a PMO. I'm not a PMO director because I'm not there directing how we support projects across the organization or working out the integrated PMO model. I am an analyst because I am the expert in risk management in our organization. So I've got expert knowledge. So sometimes as you move up to manager and director, your level of competence drops, which sometimes doesn't come as a good message to people. But I would argue there are a lot of site managers who couldn't lay a brick anymore. Yes, because you develop new management skills and other skills, and you lose some of the skills you had when you were doing a more junior job in the organization. So we had quite an interesting piece about, you know, kind of which competencies drop off and which ones are more essential for a PMO director or a PMO analyst. So what we've got for each competence, so you will see here, this is the project competence in a project for benefits and value management. And we see these are the indicators at foundation level, intermediate level, advanced and expert. And what we've done is we've provided a list of things and they're indicators. So what we don't want people to think is, oh, it's a tick list. I need to be able to tick everything off this list. What they are is indicators that say these give an indication that you're working at this level. Now, the important thing about competence is it's not just that you think you can do it, it's that you've actually done it. So you can kind of provide some evidence that you've done it, and other people will support the fact that actually you're competent because you've been able to do that. So again, you might say, well, I can only do 3 of those. Well, that doesn't mean you're not competent at that level. It just means you've not had the opportunity to do some of the other ones. And you can say, well, I'm sure I could do that if I tried, Eileen. That doesn't necessarily make you competent at the next level. Okay, it might make you capable but not competent. Yes, you may be able to do it, but you've not been able to kind of demonstrate all of the different aspects. So it's still not, it still needs to be taken and used with some thought. You know, it's not a kind of a, as I say, just a tick box exercise. So there we've got advanced and expert. So, and interestingly, you'll notice this is benefits and value management, the context of a project, and typically we wouldn't have an expert at project level. They'd either be working at a program level or typically a centre of excellence if they're going to be the expert. So there's a couple of examples of those. And you would think that would be it, wouldn't you? We didn't stop there. There's a lot in this. This is why it took us 5 years to do. What we said is, in order to be able to do your job, there's things that you need to know. And it varies from job to job. We've kind of pulled out the top 5 or so for each role and said, these are the things that actually you need to know. And typically they're about your organization. So you can go in with some generic knowledge, but actually you need to kind of work out from your organization what that is. So we've got things like kind of the corporate language and communication and the content of the current portfolio, any P3M and PMO theories and models that are out there in the outside world. So we've identified 16 knowledge areas. As I say, we typically pick on the top 5 or 8 for each of the 4 roles. We also identified 51 skills that potentially, now the skills are, you know, exactly as you would imagine them to be. Things like communication skills, listening skills, analysis skills, conflict management. So these are all things that you will need to kind of learn and develop and are completely transferable from other parts of the organization. They're not necessarily PMO specific, but they're saying they're skills that you will use in undertaking your role. And then the final bit, when we got there, is behaviors. Because we all know those people who are technically brilliant, but nobody wants to work with them. Yes, just because the way they conduct themselves, how they talk to people, how they respond to people, their general kind of approach to work. And you kind of think competency is being able to do the job and being able to continue to do the job and successfully work with the people in your organization. And so if you haven't got that and you're not demonstrating the right behaviors, then actually our argument was, and I said it wasn't just me, even though I was quite precious about this bit, you actually are not competent. So you need to be able to demonstrate the right behaviors. And it's really, when we have when we go through some of the talks and talk about some of these behaviors, it's really quite interesting when you see people recognize themselves that they're not demonstrating the behaviors. As I said, I was doing a course recently, and there was a guy on the course, technically brilliant. Yes. Every time, you know, there was a question, he was there. Yes. You know, I know this or no. Yes. And could talk a bit about papers that he'd read and kind of work that he'd done. And I spoke to the HR lady afterwards and said, nobody wants to work with him. And when you go through the behaviors, you just kind of recognize some of the things that he's not demonstrating. Yes. And you can kind of explain why. So he would see himself as being absolutely competent at you know, kind of manager and even director level. And we're saying, well, actually, you're probably not, because unless you learn to demonstrate some of the behaviors, who's going to want to work with you? And your own organization is not saying that. So that's where we ended up. So what we've done for each of the 4 role profiles is we've actually created a role profile associated with those 4 roles. So every competence is laid out in detail, and we've said, well, actually, here's a demonstration of what they look like for each of the 4 job roles. Is that good enough? I think that works. That's 5 years' work to get to that, to get it all. It was work with volunteers. I'm sure if we all locked ourselves in a room, it would be less rich and we could have finished it a lot sooner. But I was very happy to use the expertise and the skills of real practitioners who are working and doing the real jobs. So that's what we've ended up with. So that's what the publication is. It's got, I'm just going to show it because it really does exist. Yes, there is one, there is one version here, which if anybody wants to actually have a look at it, it's got all of the competencies in individually. Then in the back, it's got all of the role profiles with those responsibilities, knowledge, skills, behaviours, the other competence framework, remember the 6 competence frameworks, and then the particular level that's required for the top 7 to 10 competencies that are relevant for that role. So we haven't done every competency for every role because we've said that's not relevant. So that's what we've got. Okay, now we did it, we published it, we got the stationery office, so a recognised publisher, to put it out there. And part of our conversation was not just about kind of getting the publication out there, was trying to educate people on how to use it, why you might want to use it as an individual, why you might want to use it as an organisation. So as an individual, in the back, what we've got is a step-by-step process that allows you to assess yourself and your competence. So you can pick your role, analyst, administrator, director, and you can score yourself against the 4 different levels. You can, it asks you for some evidence to say, well, you say that you're intermediate level. Well, demonstrate to me, you know, kind of explain how you hit the indicators, explain how you're working at this level. It also asks you for evidence of your knowledge, skills, and behaviours to demonstrate that as well. Now, the idea is that if I'm an administrator, then I can obviously see, well, am I competent now to do my current role? I could do myself as an analyst, because actually there's a new analyst job coming up in a couple of months' time, and I want to just make sure that I've got enough things to kind of move into that role. Yes, and so I might not be fully competent, but I can understand the areas where I've got some gaps. So I might want to do some development. And again, as I'm kind of being in that role for a period of time, I want to just continue to improve my skills and capability, so I can actually just kind of start working out which are the areas of the skills that I want to improve over the next 3, 6, 12 months. So great for an individual to be able to do that. We also think it's really useful when you're putting together your CV, that it allows you to kind of articulate where you're competent, and you've got down your evidence around each of those various competencies. It also becomes really interesting from a team perspective, because what it allows you to do as a team perspective, it allows you to do your to group the competence levels from across your particular team. So in the PMI, it says if we're delivering these services, these are the competences we need. And this allows you to kind of do that detailed analysis to say, well, how best can we use the skills and capability of the team to develop the services that we've got? Now, what we've got for in the House of PMO for the members, we've got an online system that actually kind of does it rather than doing it a paper and pen. And I know a couple of people who've created their own spreadsheets. Bless them. Where would we be without Excel? Yes, they've created their own kind of spreadsheets to do that. But so it's paper in the book. We have got an online system to do it. But the idea is that you can use this now as a measure of your own competence. What we've done is we've also created some certifications. Now, just to show, you know, kind of where we were when we published this, we didn't want to go out there and say we have got a perfect competent framework. What we think is we've got is the essentials. So we've created some certifications around the competence framework that says when you do the course and pass the exam, you'll demonstrate that you've got all of the essential information you need in order to be able to do that role. So we're not stamping you on the head and saying you're a competent PMO manager, you're a competent PMO director. We're saying you know about the role, you know all of the different facets of it, you've got a level of competence, but you know where you need to continue to develop, but you actually understand the full role. So that's where our certifications have come in. So where are we going next? And I'm nearly finished now. Happy to deal with any questions. What we are looking to do now is to develop some of those specialist role profiles. So what happens if I am the risk management specialist? What if I'm a controls engineer? What happens if I'm kind of the business case specialist? So we still believe that the competence list is suitable, but what we may have is some specialist indicators for those 4 different levels for those specialist roles. So that's on the cards. That's the next project we'll be kicking off probably in the new year. But the second project that we're also doing is the service catalogue. Anybody know about a service-based PMO? A little bit is about that. So this is where we say, rather than just do stuff, what the PMO kind of lists its services. So a bit like a garage or a restaurant, it says, these are the things that we do. And if you're going to engage with us, ask for something off the menu, or something off the list. And Stuart Dixon is a good friend of ours. Stuart wrote this book, commuting into London every day over a number of years. And it's basically his 30 years of the things he's done in PMOs. And what the House of PMO does, we've published the IPR, and we're doing exactly what we did with the competency framework. We've got a group of volunteers who are going through, and rather than just being kind of Stuart's view of the world, we're now saying this is a community view of all of the services that we could provide. So not things that we do provide, but all of the things that we could provide, again, as a resource for individuals who work in PMOs who might want to think about setting up a service-based PMO. So our work hasn't stopped. Lindsay and I are absolutely dedicated to the PMO community, doing things that help people. All of the things that we didn't have when we were PMO managers, we're trying to create now for the next crowd who are coming in behind us. So we have got a website. If anybody wants any more details, please feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, that's me done, I think, just about on the hour. If anybody's got any questions. I haven't taken a breath, I know, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's always wonderful to hear people talk about PMO, the integration. So thank you very much. I've got two questions. One is, how important is it in your view that people who go into PMO come from project delivery background? And the second one is, and the other one is, what impact do you think that AI will have on PMOs, but also the roles within the PMO?
Okay. Do first one first. And in terms of coming into PMO from a project background, we're seeing people come in without a project management experience at two levels typically. They'll either come in at the administrator level, where they, and my sister-in-law is a prime example. So she was an executive assistant for a professional services organization. And they then, because she was supporting her program manager, essentially that's who she was executive assistant to, they decided overnight to call them project administrators. So, and essentially her job didn't change at all. She was doing what she always did, but there was just recognition that her kind of secretarial support was in a project environment. And so when you come in at that administrator level, I think we need to be very careful about putting people to work in that environment without giving them some project management training. And one of the things we do in our course for Essentials for PMO administrators is provide them some project context. So say, these are the types of things that you do in your role. This is what it means from a project perspective, without having to send them on a Prince 2 course or a CPM course. It just is enough for them to understand their context. So I think with a bit of education coming in at that kind of entry-level PMO works well. But what we're also seeing now is people coming in either at a PMO manager, but more often the PMO director role, where they haven't come from a project management world, they've come from a senior executive world, which I think is really exciting, because even though it means that kind of the people, non-PMO people, are taking those roles, they're people who've played a sponsor role for a transformative program. They recognize how projects and programs deliver the strategy for the organization and support the delivery of the strategy. They understand the high level view of portfolio management. They may not necessarily understand all of the technical bump that sits underneath that, but they understand the general principles. They have credibility in the organization. They understand the market and the industry, and they can work with the senior management to work through the prioritization. And then they can get experienced method people, tools people, business case people, risk people to do all of the processes that sit behind that. So I think at those kind of the very top and the very bottom levels, people with non-project experience in terms of project delivery are coming in. Typically at manager level or analyst level, they've either got some project management training or education, or they've had experience in terms of project management or program management. I would say for the analyst and the manager role has been my experience. AI. I was watching the news today, and I find it fascinating kind of what's happening with AI. And there was a gentleman on the news last week who said all of the hype about AI is still significantly underplaying what AI is actually going to be able to do going forward. And I did a day in Sydney last week when I'd finished doing the training in Melbourne, and I went to meet a friend of mine who's about 2 years ahead most people playing with AI, and what he's doing is just blows my mind. And I think the challenge is for us is to be ready to embrace it. I think I listened to a webinar around, it was a risk management webinar, which is how AI is going to impact risk management. And they were saying, oh, well, perhaps we're not going to be risk management specialists anymore. Perhaps we're going to have to look across the whole of projects. And I'm going, yeah, those people already exist. They're called PMO people. And I think there will always be a people element, and I think there'll always be that kind of translation and making it digestible and explaining that and being able to kind of take some of the work from the decisions that have been made. So I think the PMO will still be there, but I think some of the menial tasks that we were doing in terms of the processing will disappear. Let me give you just a couple of examples. And again, some of the work that Kelvin's been doing. So Olga, one of my project managers. So we have a weekly reporting cycle. So every week you have to get your project report into the PMO by 9 o'clock Monday morning. We don't do 5 o'clock Friday night, we'll do 9 o'clock Monday morning. Okay. Every Monday morning I come in, Olga's report is there and green. I don't worry about Olga at all. Every report is there Monday morning. Every Monday morning it's a green. I've read it. Seems perfectly kind of plausible that it is a green, so I don't worry. What the metadata tells me, though, which AI will point out to me, is that Olga used to send her report in at 5:30 on a Friday night. Over the last 10 weeks, it's gone from 5:30 on a Friday night to 10 o'clock on a Friday night to 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning to 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon to 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning to 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. Now, I've missed all of that. Yes, because I've just seen I've got Olga's report in on a Monday morning. It will also do sentiment analysis that says Olga's report used to be quite chatty and kind of quite lighthearted. And actually the language that Olga is now using is quite kind of pinched and terse. So her whole tone has changed around how she's talking about her project. Now, I've missed all of that as a human. Yes, I've just gone, it's green, I've read it, looks okay. I haven't got the time to kind of give it that care and attention or that detailed analysis. AI will do that for me without, kind of in the blink of an eyelid and say, actually, you need to go and speak to Olga. Something's happening on the project, or Olga's having a really bad time because something has changed in terms of the when and how she fills out her project report. And that's where I think we need to kind of be ready to use AI to help us do a better job than what we do now, because we're going to have more data to play with. The difficulty, I think, will be finding out what data to use and being able to validate the data to make sure that it actually still makes sense. Because again, we used ChatGPT, our friend, to do our Christmas quiz. And the Christmas quiz, ChatGPT was adamant that one of Santa's reindeers was called Helen. Right? So at the minute, and ChatGPT is getting better, but we still need to be able to sense check the information that we're given to be able to kind of use it. So I think our jobs will change, but I think there's the same happened, and it's happened before. There'll be new jobs created, and we just have to do some of our jobs differently. I'm excited by all of that. It's amazing what they're doing.
I see strong resemblance to what you've been doing and the skills framework for information age.
Yes.
How do they impact?
So I don't know a huge detail about the skills for an information age. I know when we went to look at the skills that we put in the competency framework, we didn't make those up. We took them from the skills framework and says, actually, these are the skills that you need to use. So we tried not to rewrite anything that was already written because we had a big enough task. So we just took those. We also did some comparison, and we did get some HR specialists in to help around some of the stuff because, although I did my HR several years ago, we're not all HR specialists, so we wanted some input, and we tried to kind of map those as well to the different roles. What we didn't do, because it would have been too complex, is say for communication, what level of communication you need for the 4 different roles. So we didn't want to put levels for each of the 51 skills. It's just too big a task to do. Anybody else? No. Well, I think there's some food left and there's some coffee left. So we'll be up at the top for the next kind of half hour or so. So anybody wants to stick around and have a chat. Thank you very much for making it out on a wet evening in Auckland, but lovely to see you all and lovely to be here. Thank you very much.
Everyone together. We need to stop recording. Right. Stop recording.
Is it touchscreen? If you make it full screen, okay.
Yes.
There is a suggestion to take